keeping the main thing in your photography on this episode of Develop and Process. Before we get started with this week's episode, one little bit of follow-up. The contest is running until tonight at midnight Pacific Standard Time if you're watching this on Saturday. And that's the print giveaway in which I'm giving away 2 silver gelatin darkroom contact prints from 8x10 film. So you still have a matter of hours to get in on that. Check out the giveaway video I posted recently. Thank you so much to all of those of you who have entered. It's just really awesome to see so many people entering the giveaway, and I'm looking forward to giving out those prints. So on with the topic of this week's episode. Most of us got into photography because we loved something. Whether that is the natural world as a landscape photographer, or wildlife as a wildlife photographer, or surfing as a surf photographer, or sports as a sports photographer. You get the idea. We get into photography because we love spending time in a particular environment or with certain people, or doing a certain thing. And in my case, obviously that's the natural world, and just spending time in the wilderness, in nature, and getting to know it better and capturing that through images. Perhaps the reason you got into photography is because you love just making something from almost nothing, the pure creativity of the craft. Or whatever that reason is. Maybe you love visually exploring the world and documenting your experiences. I know I do. But whatever that main core focus is, I just want you to think about that for a minute. What's the real reason you got into photography? Why are you doing this? Why are you watching this video? Why do you care? What's that thing in your heart that's the reason? If you peel back all the layers of cameras and websites and social media and clicks and likes and follows and trips and clients and all this stuff, sales and prints, peel all that away. Why are you a photographer? What's the reason? And so I wanted to talk about this today because I think all of us got into photography for some meaningful reason. And no matter what point we're at in our photographic journey, there are these things that tear at us and pull us in a million different directions away from that core focus. And when we're first starting out in photography, that tends to be learning. So we are learning aperture, shutter speeds, ISO, and we're learning the exposure triangle and how that works. And we're trying to figure out how to use our cameras, and we're reading camera manuals, and we're just stumbling through and making all kinds of mistakes. Or maybe the camera's on automatic and we're just trying to figure it out. And so for a time, learning the basics of photography occupies our mental bandwidth more so than making creative images does. And I'm not saying they don't go hand in hand, but one becomes the focus more so than the other oftentimes. And then later on, we get better at photography and we sort of learn those basics. And then we're often driven to finding the shortcomings in our gear, in our camera, in our lens, in our software. We're buying Photoshop, and now we're buying a new lens that's a f2.8. And then now, we're thinking, I bought APS-C or Micro Four Thirds, I need to go to full frame, or we're thinking about, I bought this brand of camera, I need to go to that brand. I bought a DSLR, now I need to go mirrorless or whatever. And we're getting all into the gear discussion. We're diving into the rabbit hole of internet forums and DxO mark scores and, camera reviews on YouTube. And that becomes our life for a while. And all of our waking hours and spare time are spent on that. And that again pulls us away from why we got into photography. And then later on, we've got our camera and we've settled on a certain one. And for a time, we often will come back to our focus and we'll focus on why we got into photography. But then we've got all these images. So we got to focus on learning the editing. And then we get better at editing. And then once we've edited, we got to learn how to distribute those images. And so now you've got to learn how to build a website, or how to manage a social media profiles, or how to present your images in a cohesive portfolio to people so it just doesn't look like a bunch of chaos. So you're learning these skills of curating your work, presenting your work, managing what essentially are digital marketing campaigns, whether it's social media, email lists, websites, any sort of self-promotion. And you've got to learn that and become good at it. And that takes work. And I know it doesn't come naturally to me. The technology does, but the whole idea of having to promote your own work doesn't. It's very awkward and frustrating for me. And so that's something I have to learn as well, but it's something that takes away from the core focus again. And so you're focusing on all this for a time, learning how to share your work effectively and learning to do stuff with it. And so that becomes the focus. And then later on, you maybe scale up and you're working on bigger and you want to go pro with your work. So now you're looking at how do I finance my work, and you're looking at budgets and taxes, and you're looking at, how to generate enough income from things like client work or print sales or workshops or whatever. And so learning how to run a workshop, learning how to do client sales, learning how to manage a budget, learning how to do contracts, all that stuff again starts occupying more and more and more of your time, to where you're a business person almost more so than a photographer. And it's frustrating. And again, that pulls you away from your core focus. And then for me as a landscape photographer, and I'm sure other landscape photographers can relate, the whole idea of planning trips, like these big, ambitious landscape photography trips that we do to places like Utah, Arizona, Nevada, Oregon, whatever, Washington, or even Patagonia or Iceland, they take so much work, so much research, so much money, so much time. They're excruciatingly complicated and difficult to pull off. And so we're finding our time focused on looking at maps, looking at travel logistics, mapping out routes and fuel economy and accommodations and campsites, and working on our vehicles and fine-tuning them and looking at preventative maintenance, and does this alternator need to be replaced, or does that battery, or looking at our tires, and then these tires aren't going to work, they're not strong enough to handle the roads in Death Valley, so now I got to raise another $1,200 to buy new tires. And then, I don't have a place to store my gear, so now I have to buy a $1,200 roof rack, and then I've got to find storage containers that aren't going to fall apart on me. And then now I need a refrigerator to keep my food cold, and then now I need, a tent system to sleep in, and then I've got to research tents. You get the idea. It's just like it never ends. You're always having to do more learning, more research, more work, expanding into new areas. And all of these things are helpful, but they pull us away. And so I'm not saying that they're bad things, but I think we need to remember to focus as often as possible, bring our focus back to the core of why we became a photographer. What are we doing this for? Why are we practicing this craft and this art of photography? What is our driving purpose? What is our vision? And just bring our focus back to that time and time and time again, no matter how many things pull us away from it. And so I'm kind of saying this to you guys today because I need to hear this. I've been spending so much of my time just doing so much research in other areas in order to make future trips and future photography possible, that oftentimes I don't get to do actual photography for months at a time or weeks at a time. And it sometimes can be very frustrating. And so I just want to remind us all to bring our focus back to our original focus and keep the main thing the main thing. So I hope you enjoyed this and found it useful in some way. I'm Justin Lowry, and until next time, stay curious.